Chapter 3. Individual Self-Government. All this bashing of government and government laws makes a lot of people uncomfortable. They don't want to be involved with anarchists. They don't want to be at the mercy of the mob. The very thought of life without government is terrifying. So let's be clear. Government, rightly understood, is part of what is. If the purpose of life is to expand one's awareness of consciousness, then government must be an integral part of this Consciology creed. But how can this be when political governments hinder this evolution of the awareness of consciousness? Well, it seems that for more than 2,000 years we have been using tools articulated by Plato. Perhaps it is in time to inspect the tools offered by his contemporary Aristotle. Little of Aristotle's contributions have survived to this day for reasons that will become obvious. But from the remaining scraps, it can be shown that these two philosophers offered opposing definitions of government. Throughout the generations that followed, mankind has explored the ramifications of Plato's concepts of political government. The possibility of another point of view has been largely ignored. Consciology states that human beings are limited, incomplete, and imperfect. If that is a fact, it follows that there are things that human beings cannot do, or that they do only at their peril. A prudent human being would affirm that an unaided human cannot fly off of cliffs. The imprudent human being may hold that unaided humans can fly off of cliffs, and does so once. Recognizing these limitations seems to be in the best interest of human beings' continued expansion of one's awareness of consciousness. A recognition of these limitations requires discipline, self-discipline. Related university courses in a particular field are called a discipline. A discipline defines what can and cannot be done in that field. The discipline involves ruling out the impossible and focusing on learning and expanding the possible. The discipline does not teach one how to accomplish the impossible. It simply points out where the possibilities lie. By following a discipline, a greater awareness of the possibilities is achieved, and an increased awareness of the consciousness of what is evolves. Although one might prefer a world where discipline was not necessary, human beings who are limited, incomplete, and imperfect do not experience absolute freedom. Freedom for human beings entails freedom of choice among possibilities. The choices are limited by natural laws. The choices are further limited by human laws. Abiding by these laws requires discipline. Freedom of choice does not include a choice to ignore natural law. Freedom of choice does include a choice to ignore human law. Discipline determines which human laws will be followed and which, if any, will be ignored and under what circumstances. Discipline can be self-administered, or it can be administered by others. The others can be members of one's family or members of an outside group, whether gang, religion, or government. In this society, the outside group usually is a political government, and its representative is called a policeman. In other societies, another group might be dominant. This discipline from the searcher after authority is administered by the representative of the authority. This form of discipline occurs after the fact and may not be consistent with the severity of the infraction. In other societies, what in America would be a minor offense is a capital offense, and vice versa. What passes for proper behavior in one country may be considered barbaric in another country. The human laws of each country's political government reflect this diversity. Proper behavior may appear to be a matter of geography. To the searcher after what is, discipline is internal, administered by the individual. It occurs before the fact and is a preventative measure that requires no retribution, no vengeance, no revenge. Like in the movie The Sting, Henry Gondor, the king of the confidence men, sums it up with, "Revenge is for suckers." No retribution occurs if self-discipline prevents the infraction from happening. The searcher after what is practices self-discipline, the ultimate form of government, self-government. Communist Russia's government operated as a one-party system. One voted to affirm or reject the Communist Party selection. The United States operates under a two-party system. But does anyone believe that either system really represents all of the viewpoints that exist? Many countries have a multiplicity of parties that have to form coalitions to rule. Presumably, these coalitions in the U.S. are made within each political party. It's a system staunchly supported by those who donate to the political parties. Wouldn't any prudent supporter prefer to pay off two parties instead of 22? How many parties should there be? Would more than 22 be preferred? Individual human beings Individual human beings are complicated. They are constantly in a state of flux. They change. They evolve. They progress. One day they discover the fallacy of what they believed the day before, and not until tomorrow will they recognize how that alters their other conclusions. Does a living creature ever stop breathing, thinking, or feeling? Is not every living creature constantly influenced by everything with which it comes in contact? Tell you what, I will let you represent my views if you will always stay by my side so that I can be sure that you are up to date on my current views. No, that's not good. What use would you be? I can do it for myself. Then you can represent yourself, and we'll each be represented. Of course, that does make quite a few representatives, and each one heads one's own political party. This leaves one with little time to spend on things other than politics. Politics involves how one deals with other groups, including the groups we have already mentioned, gangs, governments, and religions. A person routinely spends 8 hours a day sleeping. Another 8 hours of weekdays is spent working to provide food, clothing, and shelter, so that the rest of the time can be free to pursue family matters and whatever else one might find of interest. This probably leaves no more than a couple of hours a week for religion and or government. One cannot spend all of one's time representing oneself in governmental matters. Representative self-government sounds good, but it is not possible. If one assumes that everyone in a group is the same, then the group can be represented by one of its members. But everyone is not the same. Each individual is different in handwriting, in fingerprints, in voice print, in facial contours, in DNA. Each new scientific breakthrough reaffirms it. In Lincoln's address at Gettysburg, he was speaking for the political government when he praised a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But Consciology requires a new declaration praising self-government of the person, by the person, and for the person. It is not possible for you to represent me. It is not possible for me to represent you. I cannot read your mind. I cannot, by an act of my will, so much as cause your finger to twitch. Like it or not, no one but you can be responsible for you. Your right to be you is truly inalienable. It is time to expose the rogues who pretend to be able to represent others. These demagogues represent no one but themselves. They know this. Their power flows from the sanction of their victims. One victim reclaims one's power, and the demagogue's power is diminished by one. Reclaiming power is a simple individual act of the person, by the person, and for the person. President Lyndon Johnson said, "Politics is the art of the possible." He did not say it to communicate any great truth. He did say it to obscure a process in which he had become proficient. After devoting years of one's life to mastering a technique, it is natural to want to put a good face on it. No one would have repeated his statement had it been, "Politics is the art of the unprincipled." Or he might have put it even more bluntly, "With politics is the art of corruption." By substituting the possible for corruption, he transforms a despicable pursuit into something clever and inventive. Politics is both clever and inventive. It is also unprincipled and corrupting. By focusing on the skills involved in the process, it obscures the fact that however clever the process, the result is deception and theft. The mass of the people are led to believe that politics is a process whereby they can better their circumstances on a scale not possible any other way. Actually, politics, like any other racket, is the art of distraction, pointing to a few winners with one hand while hiding the losses of the masses with the other hand. It is fraud on a grand scale. Few are ever able to tabulate the losses that offset the much-lauded winners before the politician has embarked upon yet another scheme to defraud. Those who would inspect these grand designs and focus on the bad along with the supposed good are denounced as naysayers, negative, reactionary, and against progress. Something does not come from nothing. There is no free lunch. Everything has its price. These are unerring maxims that cannot be abridged. And Las Vegas has grown from a village to a metropolis, espousing just the opposite, and politicians continue to flourish. Self-government requires no groundswell of humanity. Self-government occurs one individual at a time by permission of the sovereign of the universe, that one particular, unique, and solitary individual, one's own consciousness. Okay, one might counter, an individual can be a self-governing human being, a searcher after what is, who renounces a search after authority external to oneself, and instead attempts to internally expand one's own awareness of consciousness. But what about those who don't? How can they be made to join the group? Made to join the group? Before that question, a valid understanding was taking shape. But what are these obsolete words from the past, made and group? As was just stated, this is not a group event, but an individual revelation. Made is a term used by groups of searchers after authority, gangs, religions, and government. The discipline administered by the searcher after what is directed inward toward oneself. Self-discipline, individual, self-government. The searcher after what is recognizes one's limitations and that one's power to make things happen is limited to oneself. It cannot be extended to others. Well, this is complete rubbish, one might protest. Governments make human beings do anything they command, even die. It is true that political governments wield unlimited external power over human beings. The question is whether this condition is a fact of what is or a giant deception. Is the searcher after what is destined forever to be the chattel of the searcher after authority? A group of human beings, any group, holds title to no power that is not held by each individual that comprises that group. Most will acknowledge this limitation in regard to vigilante groups. The conscience of each member acting alone would prohibit action that the mob hysteria allows. The mob hysteria is an example of the group reverting to the instinctual animal past. But the focus here is on the fact that no one is willing to grant that this mob has a right to do anything that no member of the mob possesses a right to do as an individual. The searcher after authority can be convinced of the validity of this limitation in regard to the mob or gang, but has trouble recognizing it in regard to other groups, political government, and organized religion. In principle, little separates the mob from the political government. Being seduced into acting in partnership with the mob is often excused on the grounds of being caught up in the emotions of the moment. In the cold light of day, few would defend the mob action. Then how can one sanction what political governments do? A government uses force and violence when it chooses to make human beings do things that those human beings would not freely choose to do. The linking of the words law and order implies that one begets the other. The viewpoint being presented here is that, on the contrary, human law begets disorder. Yes, human law is decidedly better than the autocrat. But exactly how much better? In the beginning chapter, a discussion was begun regarding the fall of the Lucifer spirits from their heavenly bliss to their present station. Here they function as humanity, trying to expand their awareness of consciousness. They have exchanged the externally driven, instinctual, animal behavior for the self-consciously human potential of individual responsibility. Should we cringe when we admit that these Lucifer spirits are us? It is a fact that we certainly are not yet God. Their prideful error was a logical one, even a necessary one, in the evolution of the awareness of consciousness. If the searchers after authority are wrong, and the searchers after what is are right, does that make one valuable and the other useless? No. Both are necessities in the grand scheme of things. In attempting to be a searcher after what is, all possibilities must be examined. The searcher after what is cannot take the word of another and bypass the search after authority based upon another's experiences. The journey is an individual one and must be individually experienced. Vicarious experience is not enough. It is not enough to know the right answer. One must also know the proof of its legitimacy. One can encounter the same experience in 1,000 different disguises without having individually proven it for oneself. One will be tricked by one or more of the disguises, and no advance is possible. Before one continues on the search after what is, one must thoroughly explore the search after authority. It is not enough to know that the search is a false one. Only by learning the thousands of ways in which it is false is it possible to continue in the search after what is. Otherwise, one repeatedly falls into traps that return one to the altar of the search after authority. It is easy to identify where one lacks knowledge. One's fears of a world without authorities identifies where more knowledge is needed. With more complete knowledge, it becomes apparent that most fears are little more than illusions. Everything one does not know, one ignores. This ignorance is perpetuated by fears. This fear of the unknown is normal, but it is greatly exaggerated by the searcher after authority. The searcher after authority in phase 1 believes one's salvation can come from discovering this sought-after external authority. The searcher after authority in phase 2 has discovered the hopelessness of finding the external authority, but continues the quest by attempting to become one of the authority figures. It is fear of facing the failure of the search after authority that prevents the searcher after authority from discarding this fruitless search and resuming the honest search after what is. It is this phase 2 searcher after authority that is most adept at inspiring fear in others and terrorizing those who would otherwise more readily abandon the search after authority as the lost cause that it is. But it would not seem to follow that one could pronounce with complete certainty that the searcher after authority's search is doomed to failure. It would appear that such an absolute revelation would be an impossible conclusion for certainty-challenged human beings. Objections to such a bold assertion would appear to be valid. How can one be certain of a conclusion that must be valid under all conditions, while recognizing that one's human condition precludes the possibility of one experiencing all of these conditions? Why should one take seriously an absolute report by a reporter who is not absolute? It would be easy to surrender the point because of the overwhelming evidence. However, the point cannot be ceded. The question becomes, can it be defended? You will recall that reason inspects the individual pieces and that emotion is concerned with the big picture. One must master this comprehensive view in addition to the nose to the grindstone view of how each of the details fits together. It is the world map compared to the city map again. One functions within a current city map and is guided by its detailed routes. At the same time, one must be aware of one's position on a world map. Maps charting the present, the past, and projections of the future must guide one's travels in order to maintain the wide scope accounting that permits one to rise above ceaselessly repeating past errors. The error of assuming that ethical behavior must have a mystical foundation comes from the human being's inability to grasp absolute. The logic is that since human beings are not absolute, they must place their faith in something that is. And the search after authority begins. One acts to maintain one's own existence by satisfying one's basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter. Economics involves the study of how these needs can be satisfied. Ethics involves satisfying these needs in a manner that does not conflict with other human beings trying to satisfy their needs. Since ethics involves absolute principles, it has been assumed that its basis must be in something that is absolute. Thus, the justification for relating ethics and mysticism. Since Consciology recognizes that human beings cannot comprehend the absolute, a mystical foundation might appear to be a necessity. Is mystical intervention required to permit human beings to contemplate absolutes like principles? Principles are absolute because they are presumed to be valid absolutely in every situation when fully understood. Ethical behavior involves an unswerving belief in the validity of principles, even under new circumstances never before encountered by that individual. Organized religion holds that belief in absolutes requires faith in a mystical hierarchy for which it presumes to speak. But it is not a matter of faith. It is a matter of commitment. Faith is a belief in another's judgment. What is required is a commitment to act on one's own judgment. What one knows that one knows what is. The searcher after authority continues to have faith in the outward search for the authority to guide one from without, just as instinct guides animals not yet evolved to the potential self-conscious responsibility of human beings. The searcher after what is searches within to find how one can become one's own guide. If one is not yet convinced that the search is an inward search, then the search after authority continues. But if one is convinced by the circumstances that one has encountered in life that the search must be an inward search, to that individual it is a fait accompli. One could continue to certify that one's every experience continues to validate this conclusion that the search must be an inward search after what is. And one does continue to do this. One continues to inspect the evidence that one's life reveals. But one does not wait for all of the evidence to be encountered before announcing one's verdict. For human beings will never possess all of the evidence. No, it is not 100% proven. But from one unique and only point of view, it is 100% proven up to now. There may be a circumstance out there, somewhere, that would challenge it. And one will continue to search, always acknowledging that that possibility does exist. But human beings are acting beings. Until contradictory evidence appears, one must act on one's commitment to what one's total being confirms. The first step to understanding oneself is the affirmation of I am that occurs with the emergence of self-consciousness. The second occurs when one is willing to affirm that one's progress stems solely from one's own understanding. When one progresses to the third affirmation, one affirms that the search after authority is doomed to failure. While this is a negative statement, its thrust is entirely positive. All of the conscious energy that has been utilized by the searcher after authority is liberated to focus totally on the search after what is. This is an affirmation based on principle, an absolute dedication to ethical behavior. It affirms one's knowledge that the search after what is an inward search. The outward world is transformed into a laboratory in which one is able to confirm one's inner discoveries. The outside world becomes a reflection of one's inner verity, the creation of one's own consciousness. Presently, much of what one encounters in the outside world is terrorism. The number one terrorist is political government. The number two terrorist is organized religion. Mostly through wars, manipulated famine, manipulated inflation and depression of the money supply, and manipulated suspicions of fellow human beings, this king and queen of terrorism are responsible for the majority of the violent death of human beings throughout history. Is it possible that the title of all-time killers of human beings is jointly in the possession of government and religion? Maybe that was in the past, the Crusades, the ancient warlords. Actually, the ravaging of humanity by government and religion consists of the human beings killed in its causes, as well as those who are only crippled in the process. The crippling may be physical or any handicap that keeps the individual from performing at one's best, being free to develop one's awareness of consciousness. There are handicaps of a physical nature as well as other restrictions on one's potential, mentally and emotionally, psychologically and sociologically. These edicts of government and religion are mainly in the form of human laws. The Ten Commandments are human laws. Since God is defined as unchanging, it is not too much of a stretch to presume that he and Moses had a rather heated exchange before the Ten Commandments were formulated. For a similar situation occurred a bit later in the Bible when Samuel converses with God regarding the appointment of an earthly king to rule the people. No doubt a similar conversation also occurred when Moses is said to have requested that God provide an earthly set of laws to rule the people. God's position with Samuel was that natural laws are all that human beings require. Samuel's and Moses' position was that human beings need human laws that they can administer. Of course, God knew the inadequacy of human law, but being God, he also knew that these searchers after authority could never learn the inadequacy of human law without having lived under it and experienced its deficiencies. Samuel records that he got God's reluctant approval. Moses did not choose to record God's response to his entreaty for earthly laws. But the point is that the Ten Commandments are earthly laws, not divine laws. They can be broken. Humanity can kill and covet and steal. And humanity can administer revenge and retribution, terror and death when these human laws are broken or when governments and religions think they might be broken, potentially, sometime, somehow. The pretension of government and religion to the title of King and Queen of Terrorism cannot be diminished by relegating it to the acts of some distant past. It is by the collection of taxes that governments assert their prerogative over the greatest number of the lives of individual human beings. The United States is the most economically advanced nation in the world. Its citizens enjoy more freedom than those of any other nation. Yet the United States collects more taxes from its citizens by far than any nation ever has in recorded time. Not more relative to the available riches, but more in absolute terms. Thus, more is plundered from its citizens than has ever been plundered by any other government in history. U.S. citizens relinquish more freedoms to the U.S. government than has ever been demanded by any other government in history. No, not relatively speaking, but more. After all, even government can take no more than all. And that is exactly what they always take eventually. Forgive them if they have not managed to take all from United States citizens on as prompt a schedule as other governments have done historically. Understand, the United States is unique. No country has ever managed to produce in such volume. The volume of riches has challenged even government bureaucrats to spend with a swiftness great enough to stay ahead of the inflow of booty. Even with the government's chokehold firmly in place, free people manage to produce unparalleled wealth. It is important to realize that, relatively speaking, this government may not take as much as others. Remember, there is nothing that compares to the riches created by this country, and the per capita bulk of freedoms lifted from U.S. citizens by the U.S. government is greater than the combined total pillage by all previous governments combined. Should this be a concern to U.S. citizens? Can we excuse it on the ground that U.S. citizens will probably still have enough left to continue to function at a level above most of the world? Perhaps we could, if we blind ourselves to the fact that the rate of expropriation of the U.S. citizens' riches continues to increase with an earnestness that appears to be unstoppable. Perhaps we could excuse it if we were just talking about money. Some will chide, it's just money, we still have our freedom. As has already been stated, Consciology holds that the ultimate freedom is not something available to limited, incomplete, and imperfect human beings. Human beings experience freedom as freedom to choose between available choices. The demagogue is generous with ultimate freedom. Help yourself to ultimate freedom. Take all you want. You say you want freedom to choose something for yourself? Surely you don't want to reveal yourself to be so selfish. We have granted you absolute freedom to think on anything you please. Long live freedom. One is truly free only when one is free to choose between alternative possibilities. To be free to make choices of action presumes possession of the wherewithal to make an exchange. Everything on this earth that is valued is owned by someone. To be free to choose to take possession of what someone else now possesses, one must trade something that the present owner would prefer to possess in place of what is now owned. Without owning something to exchange, there is no freedom to choose. Money is a medium of exchange. With nothing owned, goods or money, freedom to choose is gone. Without freedom to choose, of what value is freedom? Freedom without freedom to choose one's actions is freedom to do nothing and freedom to be nothing. Freedom to choose without goods or money to implement the choice is total bondage. Freedom to choose must include the right of ownership. In a world of choices, one must have the right to own things and money to implement those choices. To be robbed of one's ownership right to goods and money is ultimately to be robbed of one's freedom to choose. Without the freedom to own, of what meaning is freedom? The freedom is not in the money, though it is a necessary part. The freedom is in the individual ownership and the choices. By denying one's right of ownership and taking one's money, one's choices and one's freedom are eroded. How can one agree to be taxed and believe one's freedom remains intact? Taxes appear to take one's money. Taxes really take one's freedom to choose and one's right to own. Every dollar one relinquishes diminishes one's freedom to choose by $1. Do any of us have freedom to choose in such abundance that its theft is to be excused? There is this little rich girl. She possesses the finest toys, has the grandest parties, the best clothes, food and home, and adequate spending money. She has more than any little rich kid ever. What could possibly be her problem? Should it concern her that she is being robbed? Doesn't she have all that anyone could want? Why should this greedy little brat get to keep all of her riches? Why shouldn't taxes drain it away from her? Isn't her life of idleness an affront to us all? Doesn't she squander her money on childish nonsense? Why shouldn't a benevolent government steadily shift her money into hands that could make better use of it? Just last week, she had this extravagant party for no reason whatsoever except to pander to her own vanity. She spent $100,000 on that one party. Surely that money could have been better spent to bring more good to a greater number of people. She just had 4 little friends over to enjoy it with her. It was a garden party, and you never saw such decorations. Of course, the garden was immaculate to begin with, but they added every imaginable trinket to transform it into the garden in Alice in Wonderland. She had little people playing all the parts, even the entire deck of cards. Of course, they served tea and an array of delicacies. An acrobat performed, A very special clown mesmerized his audience. The day ended with a spectacular fireworks display. What an outrageous extravagance. The government should take all of her money and spend it to help somebody, not just entertain 5 spoiled children. May we inspect how she squandered her money. To begin with, not counted in this party extravagance, is the salary that she pays 3 full-time gardeners. Each was a Mexican immigrant, with families still living in Mexico. They came to the U.S. in hopes of finding enough work to send money back to support their families. There are 3 modest cottages at the back of the estate where the gardeners are provided housing along with their small salaries. The jobs enabled them to bring each of their families here to live with them in an environment superior to any they had ever known. The wives and the ample children each had parts in the Alice in Wonderland garden party, for which each was paid for their time and effort, and they enjoyed the experience. Their participation made them feel like part of the party. They also were paid for their time helping to assemble and position the decorations. A husband and wife, butler and cook, occupy another cottage out back. Part of the butler's duties include buying the decorations. There is a specialty store in town that has everything he needed. Many of them were imported from overseas. The costumes were made by a particularly good seamstress that the family had used for years to make all of their clothing. But this order was more than she could handle. She enlisted the help of 4 of her friends, who helped her from time to time when she had more to do than she could do herself. The butler also engaged the services of a clown and an acrobat for entertainment. They were paid handsomely, because the little rich girl liked this particular clown and acrobat the very best of the many performers she had invited to her party. The butler was also charged with the fireworks display, but he did not feel comfortable with fireworks. He contracted with a company that produced fireworks displays and had them to provide their package deal that included extra sparklers for each of the party guests. The little rich girl and her 4 little friends agreed that the party was a big success. The uncle grouse said it was a terrible waste and how he could have spent the money where it would have done much more good. He never missed attending church on Sundays and could imagine seeing his name at the top of the tithe board one Sunday as that day's biggest contributor. How the poor could have used this $100,000 so childishly squandered. There was another observer of this festive scene. The town's mayor happened by and studied carefully this latest extravagance of the little rich girl. He even asked his chauffeur to slow the limousine so he could take in the whole disgusting panorama. If the federal government would only increase her taxes, these excesses would stop, and part of it would filter down for him to spend on attracting more jobs to this town. The federal government would even use some of the money to help those in foreign countries. The little rich girl would never understand these things. All she thought of was herself and her own good times. What selfishness! What a waste! When people are in need, it's criminal. It is true that this discussion involves criminal behavior. But locking up the little rich girl and impounding her assets, after all the mayor's suspicions that marijuana was on the premises, may not be the best way to resolve this shameless display of vanity. Sure, the money went to provide a party for 5 little girls, but who actually benefited? The families of the gardeners got some for decorating and playing costume parts. Had the little girl not had her garden, they might never have come to the U.S. and enjoyed a normal home life with their fathers. The gardeners' children really enjoyed wearing the costumes. They had never before been permitted to wear such fine attire. They got to play their make-believe parts all day and to enjoy the fine fireworks display that evening from their front porches. And the extra money they made let some of them start their own savings accounts at the local bank. The clown was very talented, and his day's pay enabled him to buy some new tricks for the act, and also provided a bus ticket to appear in the Talent Search television program in the metropolis some 50 miles to the north. The acrobat had no family and was a bit miserly. He put his pay under his mattress in his small trailer in the woods. The toy store sold quite a few decorations and toy props that the characters used. They also had a wholesale division that made a large sale of fireworks to the pyrotechnic company that handled the fireworks display. The store was a branch of a national chain. Local store managers were paid based upon volume of sales. This combined sales increase moved the store into the next bracket that meant the manager would earn another full % of gross sales for that month. This really came as great news to the store manager because he had twin girls aged 9. Last month, they had visited the orthodontist and learned of their need for braces for their teeth. The store manager had not expected this extra expense and was worried about how he would handle it, until this month of increased sales boosted his commission. The seamstress was swamped with work on the costumes and was forced to work late into the night on her own work and to inspect the work of the army of fellow costumers she had enlisted. When it was over, she was exhausted. There was a travel agency across the street from her. She'd never been inside it, but this day she decided to get some of those pamphlets she could see displayed in the window. She had never been more than 80 miles from where she was born some 42 years ago. She was fascinated by the folder on the Hawaiian cruise ship, and before another week had passed, she was enjoying lounging on a deck chair in the company of some very attractive gentlemen, and one gentleman in particular. It seemed that the man who owned the travel agency was a rather distinguished-looking fellow, aged 46. His wife had died of cancer some 2 years previously. It also seems that when a travel agent sells a particular number of a particular type of cruise trip, the agent is entitled to join the cruise at no cost. He asked the seamstress if she would mind if he signed up for the cabin next to hers. The travel agent's extra cruise sales this year had been matched by the majority of travel agents nationwide. The cruise ship owners decided it was time to add to their line. They placed an order for the Connecticut shipyard to begin building the single largest cruise ship ever constructed. The pyrotechnic company was not equipped to provide a show of the magnitude that the little rich girl wanted, but her payment to them enabled them to buy the advanced equipment that would permit computerized ignition that would greatly add to the effectiveness of their displays. In addition, when rock bands performed in the nearby metropolis, they would now be able to compete to work with the bands to achieve stunning pyrotechnic effects to accompany the newest musical interpretations. Yes, the wholesale division of the toy store also made this sale of the computerized pyrotechnic keyboard and software. The little rich girl squandered $100,000 on a party. Some of the gardener's children opened $100 bank accounts. The acrobat put his money under his mattress, and we have traced where some of the other party money was spent and respent. In every instance, with the possible exception of the acrobat hiding it in the mattress, the money benefits the person spending it as well as the person receiving it. Even saving the money in the bank created a sale that benefits both the buyer and the seller. In the case of the bank, the gardener's kid is getting safekeeping of the money with some interest, and the bank gets to loan the money to another customer at even greater interest. When the acrobat puts his money in the mattress, it is in limbo, functioning neither for his good or anyone else's until he chooses to spend it. But when the money is spent, or invested in savings, or stocks, or bonds, there is no way that the contract cannot be potentially good for the buyer who values what is bought over what one had to give up to get it. The seller gets what one values more than what one gives up, with certain qualifications. No exceptions, just a couple of qualifications. All of this holds if we are discussing contracts. Contracts are free market devices whereby two or more individuals freely agree to something. The only other qualification requires that we review our Consciology definition of individual human beings. Human beings are incomplete, limited, and imperfect. Since individuals can make errors, individual contracts may not be beneficial to the buyer or to the seller, or even to either party. The participants can be guilty of bad judgment, but contracts cannot be guilty of bad judgment. Contracts are perfect every time by definition. They are freely agreed to, and if either party suspects the other of bad faith, either party is free to decline the contract. If the individual agrees to a contract that proves to be detrimental to that individual, it only proves that individuals are limited, incomplete, and imperfect. Contracts entered into by individuals of goodwill and of comparable knowledge always benefit both parties. The major drives by the little rich girl's party and wants to propose a contract. If we are to assume that the little rich girl has competent knowledge to enter into a contract with the mayor, and that the mayor is a person of goodwill, could the two of them enter into a contract? Sure. The mayor suggests the little rich girl transfer her money to the mayor's office. She gives up everything and gets nothing. The mayor gets everything and gives up nothing. Is this a contract that the little rich girl should make? Of course, he did not state it in just those terms. The mayor has a pseudo-contract to cover this situation. The mayor will take the little rich girl's money in return for agreeing to spend it in such a way as to produce the most good for the most people. The mayor points out how selfish the little rich girl's parties have been in the past, and how deserving the kids are that belong to the policemen and the firemen that work under the mayor's jurisdiction. The little rich girl can see that her parties could be viewed as a bit self-serving, and she is almost persuaded. But she recovers her composure and balks. The discussion gets a bit heated and goes on for several minutes more without a resolution. By this time, the bickering has attracted a crowd of animated onlookers eager to participate in the intervention. A little girl's whine could be heard from within the mob, though no glimpse could be seen of her. Why does that little rich girl get such nice parties and I never have them? There was a yeah and a right in support. The mayor's chauffeur dared to add, it's not right for her to have so much money. The objections were pouring one on top of the last, until the whole group appeared to be of one voice, all in opposition to the little rich girl. The mayor could see that the situation could get out of hand, and he attempted to assert his authority. Come on, folks, we can settle this without getting upset. I'm sure the little rich girl wants to do the right thing by all of you. Little rich girl, I'm sure if you will just sign this contract, that we can settle this dispute without any trouble. The little rich girl took a hurried look at each face in the crowd. She sure did not want to have any trouble. She just wanted to have parties. Suddenly, it became apparent that if she didn't sign this contract, her parties would be over. And it seemed they were just about over, even if she did sign. She picked up the pen and printed her name. The crowd cheered her and spontaneously began a party right on the spot with the little rich girl as the honoree. The mayor shoved the back of the chauffeur in the direction of the limo, and without delay, the limousine and the mayor sped away. A contract is not binding if it is entered into under duress. A contract must be a free meeting of minds, where each participant perceives that one is better off by signing the contract than by not signing it. The benefit cannot involve duress, where one chooses to sign to avoid the threat of harm. The contract is the backbone of the free enterprise system. The pseudo-contract is an excuse for government deception. The mayor's town changed after that. Friends of the mayor seemed to prosper. A few more bowls of soup were provided to the poor. One poor person was even given a new home by the city. The mayor received a lot of praise in the process. The mayor's picture appeared in papers across the state. There was talk of the mayor running for state office. There was also a brief flare-up of whispers about the recipient of the new home being a distant relative of the mayor's spouse, but there never seemed to be any more mention of whether it was true. The seamstress and the travel agent eventually married and moved to the nearby metropolis. Without the clothing and costume work for the little rich girl, the seamstress closed her shop. She tried becoming a travel agent too, but missed sewing. They moved the travel agency to the metropolis. There she could resume her sewing business. The clown also moved to a bigger city to bolster his decrease in bookings. The miserly acrobat seldom slipped money under his mattress anymore. More likely he would be fumbling trying to remove money from it for the daily bottle of wine. Other than that, he rarely left his mattress. Sales at the local toy store never again set records. The store manager's twin daughters were approaching college age. He was trying to encourage them to get jobs since he couldn't afford to send them to college. No one seems to remember what happened to the pyrotechnic display company. They went on to bigger and better things elsewhere. The bank is still doing well. It handles funds for the city now. They no longer offer interest on accounts of less than $1,000. The gardener's kids closed their accounts, and who knows where the money went. If they managed to keep any of it, it no doubt returned to Mexico with them. Their mothers and they had to return when the little rich girl could no longer furnish them the cottages to live in. The little rich girl had to begin collecting rent on them when they could not afford to stay. When the children returned to their playmates in Mexico, they related the tales of costume parties and fireworks displays, but no one believed them. The former mayor is now the state treasurer. The little rich girl works in the toy store. This fable is supposed to show that there is no way to spend money or to invest money that does not benefit a free society. The individual with more money simply enters into more contracts, increasing one's own benefits as well as the benefits going to the other parties to the contract. The fable also attempts to infer that the most frivolous expenditure of free individuals probably does more good for society as a whole than does any government expenditure heralded as beneficial to society. Simply put, no one can spend your money more beneficially than you can, regardless of what you choose to spend it on. However ridiculous it might appear to someone else, if it brings pleasure to you, it's going to do the same for society. Aren't you a part of society? The money you choose to spend will always do more good for society as a whole than the same funds spent by government bureaucrats. Why? Because the government bureaucrat is not shopping to get the most bang for the buck, but the most payola for the peso. No, every government expenditure is not dishonest. Nevertheless, it is human nature to attempt to better one's position. Spending someone else's money can never be like spending one's own money. The dynamics simply are not the same. If superiority is not judged on what product or price serves the purchaser best, then the bureaucratic judgment of superiority will rest somewhere else. Perhaps the one that is most likely to hire one after one retires from the government position. Perhaps the superiority comes from a vendor who can serve all of your needs with you having to do the least work, regardless of what price they charge the government. Whatever the difference is undeniably there. The owner of the money invariably receives more benefit when spending one's money than does another spending the same money. The money is more likely to go to those whose further use of that money will also provide the greater good for society. Nonsense, you say? Let's inspect the fable a bit closer. The clown that the little rich girl invited to perform at her party was an exceptionally talented clown. The little rich girl knew a good clown when she saw one. This one was special. He had a unique ability to mesmerize his audiences. He didn't play a clown. He transformed himself into the clown. If he was pretending to be a clown in Paris, his audience was actually with him in Paris. After the performance, they still felt that they had actually been in Paris. They could picture how it looked. They could hear its sound, smell its smell, For days afterward, they would catch themselves telling friends about how things were in Paris at this time of year, as if they were relating their own experiences. They had never left town, but his spell was like magic, a treat one rarely encounters. After seeing this clown perform in the make-believe world of Alice in Wonderland, Wonderland could never be quite separated from reality again. It couldn't be imaginary. You had been there, lived it, shared his genius. It was not like he charged for his time. The little rich girl knew that whatever he charged, it could not approach the value she placed on his unique quality of completely presenting his audience and his ability to transform them into whatever adventures he decided to lead them through. It was not like he charged for his services at all. It was a privilege to pay. However much the cost, the reward was so much greater. You almost begged him to take more, knowing full well the performance would exceed whatever the payment. It was even more than the performance. You were participating in something unique, something worthwhile, something that increased the total good in the world. Yes, it was a chance to be part of what is. It was gaining direct access to an awareness of consciousness. It was the essence of what human beings are here for. The real disservice that the mayor did in taking the little rich girl's money was not in taking the money. The real disservice was in substituting the mayor's judgment for that of the spoiled little rich girl. The mayor professed to spend the money for the good of the greatest number. In fact, the bulk of it went to ensure a position for the mayor in state government and to provide housing for some of the mayor's in-laws who ran his campaigns. But forget that. Suppose the mayor sets out to actually spend the money so that it would accomplish the greatest good for the greatest number. Would this be possible? Have the mayor's thoughts ever once spent time on how best to serve the poor? Or has the mayor's entire being been totally involved in how to reap the glory for apportioning the funds extracted from others? As stated earlier, representative self-government is impossible because it is not possible for one person to act in behalf of another. I cannot make your fingers or your mouth move, let alone feel what you touch or speak your words. And it is impossible for the interloper to spend the owner's funds in such a way as to benefit as many as would have been benefited had the owner's discretion been exercised in its spending, no matter what the owner's intention, whether the decision is made by a parliament or a little girl's decision to have a party.